Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads I'll be having conversations with to get to those books that have really impacted the way they live life, do business, do their work, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect. And my guest today is Hebra Flaster. And Anna is a journalist, speaker, and author who arrived in the U.S. as a child refugee when her working-class family fled Cuba in 1967. She's written about Cuba and the Cuban American experience in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe. Her commentaries and storytelling have aired on NPR's All Things Considered and PBS's Stories from the Stage. Anna supports human rights and peaceful democratic change in Cuba with her weekly Substack, CubaCurious, sourced from uncensored Spanish-language news outlets in and outside of Cuba. Her award-winning memoir, Property of the Revolution, From a Cuban Barrio to a New Hampshire Mill Town, explores the long reach of refugeedom on her tight-knit, multigenerational family and celebrates immigrant grit and courage. Published in 2025, the book was selected as an all-city read, a first-year university read, and has won multiple awards, including first place in the Discovery Book Awards, the International Book Awards, and the Indie Author Project, a library journal competition judged by librarians in the U.S. and Canada. With immigrants in the news and Americans on edge, Anna hopes her family's story inspires readers and reminds them of the best of America and Americans. Anna, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
Yeah, what's interesting is we've been trying to do this for a while. We were introduced by a colleague. We've been trying to get on here. We've had to reschedule, things come up, so on and so forth. And I think when we first got introduced, Cuba was in the headlines, right?
Yes.
The U.S.'s administration, I think it was I don't think it was after the Maduro thing in Venezuela, because Cuba has been in the crosshairs of the administration for a while. But what's interesting is it was in the news cycle when we first met. Obviously, things were rescheduled in our schedule, so we couldn't meet. Now it's back in the headlines right around this time that we're meeting. So it's a timely discussion because admittedly, I know very little. I've paid attention to the news, but these days, that's what I found interesting in your bio is just where you source your information from, because mainstream media, the administration, whatever I hear, I'll take in and maybe see, okay, I'm kind of paying attention to what's going on in Cuba, but you never know with the information that you're getting. It's just so tricky.
It's very tricky. And it's a lot of work if you care about accurate news.
Yeah.
It used to be that we believed what we were reading in 2 or 3 different places, and we've learned that there's a lot of bias. There's always been bias, but now it's affecting how people define a fact.
The other interesting thing is you think about all these wars that have started, all these international agreements, disputes, whatever it may be, and you think about how the U.S. has gone about certain things across different administrations. And let's just go with the term alternative facts, right? Kellyanne Conway years ago. And what's interesting is we have social media. Everybody has it. Everybody has a phone. I'm addicted to soccer, so I've been watching the World Cup. I think I watched dozens of matches by now. And, they're always panning through the audience and everybody has their phone out. So what's interesting is World War I, World War II, you had to wait to really get, one message or whatever war going back, whether it was the Civil War, letters, the other wars later in U.S. history, the TV or whatever it may be. But now it's like everybody can convey information. Whether it's in real time where they're providing a reel from their phone, whether they're doing podcasts like this. So I used to think, okay, with people out there on the ground, you have a real idea. Because I'm like, no wonder people just followed whatever the government asked them to think. They were just all getting one message. Yeah. I'm like, this is better what we have today. But then now there's just this oversaturation of platforms that you can follow. it's
It's all
incredibly tricky. So how do you view that before we
it,
jump into the main conversation?
no, it's we talk about this among my social group all the time. It's confusing. It's difficult. We're not designed as a species. We're pretty
Yeah.
smart,
Yeah.
not perfect, God knows, but it's just I can't. It's too much input, and
Yeah.
there's not enough time to. I said this the other day to our son. We're drowning in data and starving for knowledge.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
we How do you get to it? And you know, your whole focus is on leadership, and really, I think that this is a double-edged sword because a leader can convince you that they know everything, right? That they are the ones you need to listen to.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we need a leader to guide us through all of it. So it falls back on us no matter how you look at it. You have to do the work. You have to think deliberately about your news source, which ones you're going to follow, and be ready to switch when you need to switch.
Yeah.
Because people change and you change as you become more aware of the subject that you're following, or you may find that the trust you had in that leader, that thought leader,
Yeah.
it has been damaged. And so staying nimble, it's just work.
Yeah.
And I mean I don't know about you, but I fantasize about shutting the whole thing down. You had Jennifer, no, Jill Solomon on. I was listening to that podcast that you just had with her, and she
Oh,
was talking
Jill Saltzman.
Saltzman, sorry,
Yes. No, no, no worries.
and she talked about the amount of stuff that's coming at us and how hard it is to process and react and just live through it. I think we're all in major overwhelm, and as I said, when you're in this state and the world is so uneven right now, it's it's ripe for a leader, but you could get the wrong leader,
Mm,
and the wrong leader can really take you to the wrong place. So I think you have to know who you are, what your core beliefs are, and think about those. And hopefully that'll be your compass and help you figure out how to make sense of a torrent of news.
torrent. Good word. And again, a couple follow-ups even before we get to the main standard questions of my series. For you, talking about that torrent, talking about all this information, a lot of it which can be sad, depressing because of the nature of the news,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yep.
toxic because everybody's throwing their opinion in there. I typically ask this question further along in the conversation as we talk about stress and as we talk about toxicity, whatever it may be. For you, what does your self-care look like? How do you make sure not fall victim, but to be swayed too much by so much that's out there?
Well, I have to be very careful. I have suffered from depression in my past, and so I have to be very careful about even music that I listen to. Sometimes the music I'm drawn to is really beautiful, but it's heavy, if it's
Mm,
a, classical piece or whatever.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I have to even be thinking about that. It's getting back to what we were talking about before, just because of the world we're living in, we really have to be deliberate in what we're doing, in our choices. So paying attention to even what I'm doing for entertainment, music. I find also that because I sit so much, I'm not sure about you, but I'm in a chair and facing a screen a lot. So I try to get into nature as much as possible. I love gardening, especially weeding, trimming, and yard work of any kind. I love it. And I'll reward myself when I'm writing, especially if I can get to this place. I'm going to go out and weed this area of the garden. And that's my my little gift, my little present to myself. And I try to find things in the day like that. My mother used to always say, you have to have a dream. You have to have something that you're looking forward to in life, whether it's, a birthday party for a friend or a trip or um, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I find that that's true during the day. I will be looking forward to my dinner because I know I'm going to have my husband makes an amazing salmon, grilled
How'd I
salmon.
know you were going to say salmon?
I don't know. I don't know, but so I think that that's self-care. But as I said, it gets back to the being aware.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that happens with this torrent of input is that you get numb to it, to everything. And so you have to be aware of when it's too much, how to dial it down. And I also call it, I tell my kids this all the time. I'll ask them, are you taking care of the babies? They don't have children.
Yeah.
They are their babies. We are our own babies. Our body is our baby, you
Yeah.
know? So take care of your baby.
The other thing I was going to mention, just listening to what you were saying before, and taking information and considering who we're talking to and essentially trying to keep an open mind to everything that's coming at us and critically thinking. It's amazing what, and Adam Grant put out that book maybe a year or two ago, Think Again,
Mm.
or maybe it was longer back than that, I forget. But it's incredible to see that play out. You see it very rarely, but when people are rethinking what they thought they knew, regardless of your politics, regardless of what side you stand on or sit down on, whatever it may be, you're seeing a lot of that now with like the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and sometimes Megyn Kelly. And then you see how people respond to that. When somebody's really looking at the information, again, aside from what side you sit on or who you consider a viable source, but it's incredible when you can see people change their mind.
Are you talking about those people you just mentioned or people consuming their information?
Those as public examples, but then in general, if somebody can rethink something based on what they're hearing, based
Yeah,
on what they're seeing, whatever it may be, those are just very public examples of people kind of turning on what they thought they knew or believed in the past. But I think it is important to say, okay, based on this new information, again, aside from your party affiliation, aside from what you think of those characters I just mentioned, the ability to take in new information and think critically. I think
yeah,
that's what you said that triggered it was thinking critically. So that means not just standing, talking, yelling in an echo chamber, but
that's
really
right.
standing back and looking at all the pieces.
Yeah,
So I think that's
I'm
just so powerful. You don't see it that often.
no, and I love it when people do admit that.
Yeah.
I don't see it very often. You're right. And
Yeah.
and that actually, in Property of the Revolution in my book, it's a central theme of um of it's what triggered the whole story, right? My mother had supported the revolution like so many Cubans in the 50s, and she actually risked her life collecting money and medicine for the rebels, and then gradually did a 180-degree turn. And there was an event that happened that's in the book, and I can tell you about it. But that's a hard um, turn to make. It means you made a mistake. It means you were duped. And
Yeah.
the result of her being duped and facing that fact, I was duped. I totally believed this leader, changed her forever because she never again uh, looked at an artist, a politician, um, a boss, anybody in an adoring way. She refused to adore anyone ever again, other than us. uh, And it's because she realized how fallible we are, and how you can't believe in another person that way. Even we change, and we're surprised by ourselves sometimes. And it was a moment, actually, we were looking at a picture. She happened right after the revolution to be on a school trip. She was a teacher, and Fidel showed up. It was in a Zapata swamp, and it was one of those boats with the
Yeah, the fan
the
on the
fan in
back.
the back.
Yeah, yeah.
And so her group was really in awe, and somebody took a picture, and she was showing me the picture because when we first got kicked out of Cuba, we didn't have any pictures, but she went back after the Carter administration and managed to get some of our family photos out. Uh, and as this is in the book, actually. She was looking at the picture, and she said, "Oh, it was so cold that day. Look at, she was wearing what she called an abrigo, a coat, but it
Yep.
was really a sweater. In Cuba, a coat is a sweater is a coat." And she said, "Mira que yo era come mierda."
Oof,
As
really?
because
She said that, huh?
she's looking at Fidel in the photo, and her face is this face of adoration. And
Can you
that was,
translate that? I know what it
yeah,
means, but can you translate that
yeah,
for others?
come mierda is shit eater, and it happens to be one of the favorite swears that Cubans, you know, that's a,
Ah,
I don't know if I know, like, there should be every country should have the national swear, like that's the
yeah,
national swear of
yeah,
Cuba.
yeah.
And a come mierda is a shit eater who was tricked, who's dumb, who's a fool. Like in polite circles in America, it would be fool. You're a fool. But in Cuba, you're a come mierda, you're a shit eater. So she was looking at that picture, and she said, "Mira que yo fui come mierda." Can you believe I was such a shit eater?
Yeah. That's decades. I mean, she figured it out sooner than decades, but commenting on it decades later.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when people can say that in a couple months or a couple years after they change their mind. And I got to wonder how many people stay the course because they don't want to admit that.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of
They
people
don't
do.
they don't want to come across as wrong. They don't want to hear I told you so from the other side, whatever it may be, whatever side it may be.
Yeah, no, it's
Um,
absolutely true. We were talking about this the other day. We know that there's been, academia is almost by definition progressive and liberal ecosystem, right? You're supposed to be open to ideas. You're supposed to be um, questioning and whatever. But then you pick a field, you pick a topic, and you dive in and you become your expert in that, and you write your book, and you create your curriculum and whatever. And then what happens if you're wrong? That's your career. That's what you're teaching. That's what you've taught. And that's a very difficult spot to be in. And I don't know how often that happens for people in academia, but when you think about the power that they have to shape future generations, it's a um, very important topic to explore and to create a way forward for
yeah.
people to make 180-degree shifts when they need to. But it would require a lot of courage because that's your scholarship. So that's just an example of, you're talking about for people who don't move,
Yeah.
who say, um, yeah, that might be wrong, but I'd have to admit my body of work is a waste and wrong. And then it really becomes difficult.
Yeah. Uh, just because that's such a heavy topic these days, is why I react that way. But I don't know. I think depending on the circles you're in, you can do that. maybe not I get what you're saying, your body of work, your body of research, whatever it was that kind of established your brand, your reputation, your legacy, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah, I do wish more people would say that because I think that's much more powerful. I kind of extrapolate that to a leader who's come a long way under a certain mentality or process, whatever it may be, and then just says, I need to rethink things.
Yeah.
I have new information. I need to rethink things. Most people won't see that as a weakness because they'll be like, okay, this person can admit they have to
Hmm.
rethink, they have to shift, they have to pivot. I'd rather follow somebody like that than somebody who's just too proud to admit that there was an error. So who knows? I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I wish more people would
Me
absolutely do
too.
that. Yeah.
I totally do as well.
Anna, so let's get into the main conversation. So you explained a little bit, or you spoke a little bit about your past in Cuba and your mom and your family history, but who are you today? Before we dive into your path to get here, can you explain who you are today? What's the work that you're doing today in the day to day? What does your day to day look like so we can get an idea of who's going to share their book with us?
I am still promoting Property of the Revolution quite actively. I thought a year from pub date, things would be really slow, and they're not. I'm passionate about the subject, especially now with immigration in the news, with Cuba in the
Yeah.
news. And I just see the story as such an uplifting story that I'm committed to bringing that to as many people as I can. We need that. We need common sense and belief in humanity. And I think that the story shows that you can always find. Can I swear on this show? I guess I
We
already
already
did.
did. We already did. We did in
Uh,
several languages, so
yeah, yeah, yes, yes. So we want to cover all the bases.
absolutely.
But there are going to be assholes no matter where you go, no matter what you do. And you have to just be able to accept that there are way more decent people out there than there are assholes. And you have
Mhm.
to focus on that. And the story really is about that. I mean, we face racism and discrimination. We're the only Latinos practically in the city in 1967. Um, and I mean, I thought Spanish was something that only my family spoke. So, and I thought anybody who spoke Spanish was related to me as a kid, because that's who I saw speaking Spanish. So, yeah, and yet we made our way in the middle of this very American cold environment where we probably shouldn't have succeeded, but did. And so as that's part of, and the reason we were able to do that is because of the community and the goodness in people. So that's an explanation of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I thought I was going to be retired now. I'm 64. I thought, well, I was going to chill. And my husband retired a couple
Ah,
of years ago. And instead, I'm busier than I've ever been. But I care. I remind myself every day that I'm choosing this. I'm a little fried because I'm choosing this, and this is I feel like it's sort of my mission right now to promote this book and this story. So it's a lot of time on the computer. It's on podcasts. It's traveling. It's to do book clubs and presentations. Today, the all city read is going to be announced. It was chosen as an all city read in Nashua, New Hampshire, and that'll be a big deal in October. So lots of book clubs, um, community organizations, libraries, um, interviews, media, whatever. But the other piece of the puzzle that's taking a ton of my time is CubaCurious. So on Substack, I write a weekly newsletter called CubaCurious. And as you mentioned, it means staying on top of Spanish language news, uncensored Spanish language news. That's a lot of reading. It's also really depressing news because so much of it is about human rights violations. These poor, over 1,281, I think was the last, official number of political prisoners in Cuba. Imagine all the families and all the stories. And I'm trying to document that. To me, that's a very important um, piece of the story about Cuba, and it shows the suffering that's taking place. So that's a lot of reading and writing every week, often very late in the night, Thursday night, because I publish it every Friday morning at 7:21 a.m. because that's for 7 July 2021 was the uprising in Cuba that everybody forgot. You know, the countrywide uprising that July of 2021 on the 11th and the 12th. So that's why I choose
Yeah.
7:21 a.m. So it's busy. It's busy. Our son just got married. That was a really joyful event, and uh, but even there, the night before the wedding, I was cranking out my Cuba Curious. I've done Cuba Curious in Greece, in was I in Botswana? In Botswana,
Meaning while you were
in
in those places?
yeah, in Florida, in New York, in Portland, in I mean, across wherever I've been. I do my best work actually in airport terminals at the
Why is
gates
that?
because there's that buzzing noise behind you,
Yeah.
and that
So you
could
don't
be
have any earbuds with music on. You just,
no, no. And my husband does say that it's a superpower, but it's got a double-edged sword because I have been working sometimes so intensely that a smoke alarm is going off and I haven't reacted. So I really, there's a term for it, liminal space, is that it? It's the flow when you get into that flow,
yeah. Yeah.
and hours can go by. So in the summer when I'm working, sometimes I have a one of those mesh chairs,
Hmm.
office chairs,
Yeah.
and I'll get up and I'll realize I haven't even gotten up to pee in
Yeah.
how many hours, and that mesh will be imprinted on my thighs from
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely is a double-edged sword, but when you find that thing that you can work on where you lose yourself
yeah,
and your fingers just seem to be moving effortlessly without any kind of proactive thinking, like it just flows from you. When you can find that thing, whatever it may be, it is incredible. But yeah, I mean, that's at the detriment of other things in your life should you
yeah.
get too deep in there. So how do you balance that? How do you hit that sweet spot of doing just enough but then cutting yourself off?
Yeah, and as a writer, I've always had that problem where I like to go back and perfect and perfect and
Yeah,
perfect and
yeah,
perfect. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
ridiculous, right?
yeah.
Ridiculous. But I can't
But
help
it's
it.
like a drug. There's
Yeah,
something about writing you write your first draft and then you go through and you tweak it. It really is like a blank canvas and an artist just kind of touching up the different areas as they go. Like to me, writing is just incredible. Like I
yeah,
never understood it until a few years ago, in all honesty, that I really started writing more and more. But
yeah,
please, so
yeah.
how do you decide when to pull yourself back?
I, on Cuba Curious, I have to have a hard stop because my editor is I have a pissed off editor, my husband. So on Cuba Curious, if I want to get that done and ready to be published at 7:21 the next morning, I need to show it to him
Yeah, by a
by
certain time.
11 at the latest.
Yeah,
And so that's my hard stop there. But that doesn't mean that once he's edited it or commented,
yeah,
I won't go back in and mess around with it because I just can't help it. So,
yeah. You,
and especially something like this that you really, I'm writing this for an American reader because there's such a vacuum of information about Cuba and so many, I think, misconceptions about Cuba that I really care about getting this this part of the Cuban story out for an American reader. And I want it to be amazing. I want it to it's an important topic to me. I want the reader to enjoy the read and to not be overwhelmed, to not finish the newsletter in a hole because it's heavy stuff often, especially because Cuba doesn't change. It's been 70 years. of the same
Mm.
dictatorship, although some people don't see it as a dictatorship, mind-blowingly. Um, so I always finish with the Cuban treat of the week, which is a song, some cool Cuban rapper,
Hmm. Hmm.
an image of a beautiful mountainscape in Cuba, um, a rare snail, whatever, uh, something
Anna, how do you
uplifting.
structure your newsletter? Is it
I
various stories? Is it the story of the week? Like, is there a standard format that you maybe tweak from week to week depending on what's come
Yeah,
out in the news?
I started with uno, dos, tres stories. There are going to be
Yep.
three stories, short. Again, always with the thinking, would an American reader ever have seen something about any of these? And generally speaking, there's no way. But when I cover when one of the stories is about the economics or the politics, then there's more of a chance that they might have seen it. But in general, this is a really important country to this hemisphere and to the American history,
Yeah.
and it is MIA in our news for has been for many many years, and only occasionally. And now it's there, and a lot of people are confused about what the real problems are there. So that's my format, uno, dos, tres. But at the beginning, I usually start with a um, an essay, a very short essay, although they get long, um, about something that I think either a fourth story that I can't go into that I'm trying to stay away from, but I want to mention,
Hmm.
or something from our past, from the working class Cuban refugee past that I think will inform the uno, dos, tres.
And now to understand how you got to this point, you've mentioned your family history. So, what does your path to today look like? Usually, I like to start with high school age, the person's foray into the workforce or college to kind of see what it is in that path that shaped who they are today.
Hmm.
You can please pick up wherever or begin wherever you think it started for you, whatever. I mean, I would assume please start in Cuba, pero we got the Spanglish going on.
Pero
Wherever you
let
want
me
to be,
tell you,
yeah, wherever you want to begin, that kind of starts establishing who you are today, the building blocks of getting to today.
well, I wasn't going to start with Cuba, but I think you are right because Cuba is such an important part of my identity, and it and losing your homeland abruptly within 48 hours as a child and everything turning upside down, that that shaped me forever. It and so understanding that, looking back at it, making sense of it, wondering about it, all of that has shaped, sometimes running away from it. 'Cause for a long time, I didn't want to be Cuban. I didn't want to be Latina. I didn't, I just wanted to blend in. But when I got to Smith College right after high school, I really started seeing how other people saw Cuba. And in the 80s, the economics department at Smith College was full of Marxist-Leninist economists. And they would tell you at the beginning of the semester, that that was their bias. But Cuba was always shown as a wonderful alternative to our capitalist system. And when I would try to bring up the reality on the ground of what that alternative system was like for working class Cubans, they didn't want to hear it. So I would go head to head, then I would back off, then I would go head to head again with a professor. I'm trying to right the wrong, and then I would burn myself out on that, and then say I'm done with Cuba. I'm just gonna be American, and I'm gonna um, and but it followed me, right? So I started my career as a software consultant. I was the worst programmer on the planet. Uh, and even there, it followed me because in the summer I get really dark. My last name would bring up questions, and so Cuba kept coming back. Um, I worked in software my whole career until I started having children, and then I started writing. What was I going to write about? What I wanted to write about as a stay-at-home mom, Cuba. So, and what was happening? That was in the mid 90s. So that was during the rafter crisis of 1994. And then all along, I had this thing in me of telling the story of what happened to our family. I saw so much courage in my viejos and the elders and what they did for us, how they did it, what got them through. There were so many lessons in all of that. And I wanted to capture that. So, and always people when they would ask me where I was from, I'd say I was born in Cuba, and then they'd ask me questions, and so many times I heard people say, "You got to write a book about that."
Mm.
And as I began writing, I remembered that we were brand new here in the United States. We came in December, so there was a terrible blizzard 2 days after we came to New Hampshire. My grandmother, Latinos from the Caribbean, especially, we think we're going to die if there's a chill in the air. So she was pretty sure we'd all succumb to pneumonia. So I would draw pictures for her in the kitchen. She was extremely depressed. And I would draw the map of the barrio, and she would be so happy, and she'd correct me and say who lived where. And no, this one lived over here. And one day my mother came in and said, Anita, you know what? Maybe you'll write a book about what happened one day. And
Yeah.
I remembered that 4 years later when I was writing. So that's sort of how I got to the book.
So, Anna, if you could, if you want to share, you don't have to give away too much of the book, but then what is it? What do you remember, recall? What can you share about the time leading up to your leaving the island? Can you just give a snippet of what that experience was like and how you guys end up in New Hampshire of all places?
Yeah, of all places.
Of all
The
places.
so the book opens in 1967, Property of the Revolution. The full title is Property of the Revolution from the Cuban Barrio to a New Hampshire Mill Town, because I really wanted to capture the working class background. This is the working class Cuban American story. It's not of bankers or the children of you know, plantation
Yeah.
owners and whatever. So as I told you earlier, most Cubans had supported the revolution and the return of democracy, which was what the revolution promised. And then, of course, that's not what happened. So my parents had decided 4 years in, after the 1959 revolution, 5 years in, to apply for an exit visa, which was a new requirement. Before the revolution, Cubans could come and go. And then Fidel said no, because too many people were leaving and taking capital. So, but when you applied for your exit visa, your permiso, you became an enemy of the revolution. You lost your job. You were targeted. Your house could be vandalized. I have a memory of our house being vandalized. And you were at the bottom of society. And you didn't know if or when that exit visa would come. So the book opens the night that it comes. And I was almost 6 years old. And I was you know, in the barrio, I had both sides of my family, multiple generations living all around me. And I ran to the house when I heard the motorcycle, which was the guard, bringing the exit papers. And I had figured out that there was something about a motorcycle and the disappearances of these families. Because a family would be there one day and then gone the next. So after an interrogation in the house, after the guard baiting my father, trying to get him to punch him, insulting him, uh, and my mother stepping in and drawing attention away from my father, the guard takes us out of the house. We were allowed one suitcase for the family with one change of clothes and nothing else, nothing of value. And also, everything that was in the house had been inventoried the day that my parents applied to leave because gusanos, that's what Fidel and everybody called us, worms.
Worms.
Worms couldn't give away any of their property while they waited for their permisos or sell any of their property. So the day that your permiso arrived, the head of the defense of the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution, which was on every block after the revolution, basically spies for the government, came and did an inventory check to make sure that sofa was there, the plates were there, etc. Then he took us out of the house and he locked the house and he put a banner on the front door. And I remember him slapping it and sealing it really tight. And I didn't know what it read, but years later I learned that it read Property of the Revolution. And that's where the title of the book comes from. Then we were, we had to say goodbye to everybody, knowing, and this is the difference between a refugee and an immigrant, knowing that you're never going to see those people again, probably, and they're because they can't get out and you can't go back. So it's not just that you've lost everything, what material wealth you had, it's that you don't know if you'll see that great grandfather again or anybody again. And, in Latino culture, especially then, you didn't just you didn't even move to the city. I mean, people stayed in the barrio and you took care of your viejos, your old people.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
didn't, you didn't, Americans are used to getting up and flying 3,000 miles and establishing themselves way far away from home. At that time, and I think that's still part of the Latino
Yeah.
essence,
Yeah. It's in
is
Colombia too. It's very
yeah,
much like that.
yeah, is you take care of your folks and that's an honor. And that was one of the reasons my grandmother was so depressed because she had wanted to stay. She was in a Sophie's choice situation. Does she stay and take care of her father and her only sibling, her brother? Or does she go to the unknown with her two daughters and their children and husbands? What does she do?
Yeah.
Fortunately for us, she came.
Yeah.
Um,
Like you said, there's that, it's not a quick trip and I'll be back. You had
no,
outlined before, there's a permanence to it.
right. And an unwanted, there's a nature to it too. I call it the phenomenon of having your dream come true, but that dream breaks your heart at the same time. So their dream came true, but their love for their old family was
Yeah.
shattered. I mean, they never saw them again, most of them again. And these were people who would, again, my mother and my aunt grew up in a house with their uncle, my grandmother's brother, their grandfather and grandmother, my grandmother's parents, my uncle's wife, his son. It was, you know, and it was a tiny house, but that's how they grew up
Yeah.
every day, every day, every day. And then now just the two sisters and the grieving mother. So we were told that the flight out would be 48 hours later. So we had one night to say goodbye to everybody. And then at the airport, the adults were interrogated all night long. They tried to keep my father there in Cuba. My parents had already decided what they were going to do. That if one of the parents was forced to stay for any concocted reason, which happened, the other would leave with the kids and my grandmother and work to get the other one out. And the medics decided that my father had leprosy. He had a little bump on his chin, and
Yeah.
they told him he couldn't go in the morning. That was one of the ways they stuck it to you right up until the
Oh,
end.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And my mother, a big part of the message of the book is Ponte Guapa. In Cuba, guapa means beautiful, but also brave.
Yeah.
And my mother, that was her battle cry, Ponte Guapa, make yourself brave. And I always think of my mother making herself brave because she went to the medic. And I come from a long line of teachers. And you know how teachers are bossy? And somehow she got the medic to decide it wasn't leprosy. But she could easily have lost both of their chances of leaving by doing what she did. And even my grandmother, also a teacher, went over to the medic, and it was those two teachers arguing with the medic. He had no chance.
Yeah, yeah. Teachers have that ability, that skill, that aura of just transformation.
Yeah.
Like whatever I'm speaking, you're gonna believe. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Then being
Talk
double
about
teamed.
leaders. Talk about
Yeah,
leaders. And
yeah,
then
exactly, exactly.
because we ended up so one of the things about leadership, I see my mother, my aunt especially, as these women warriors who were incredible leaders, who knew who they were, recognized their mistake in trusting the revolution, and then forward thinking. They were very forward thinking, and they got the hell out. They figured out a way. They got out. When they got to the United States, they had both told each other, if we leave forever. We're not going back, which is unusual. And they settled because another Cuban family had been sponsored by a Baptist church in New Hampshire, and they found us in New York City. But they didn't want anything to do with Miami. They decided Miami was too backward looking. And so,
Mm,
but even before they got there, they knew that that's where all the Cubans were, and they figured that they were going to just be overwhelmed
yeah,
with that kind of thinking. So they ended up in New York very briefly, a couple of weeks. I started school there, and then that family of carpenters found out somehow where we were, came down, convinced my father to go back with them. My father didn't like the city for us. To go back with them to New Hampshire, there were plenty of factory jobs. There was a lot of snow. They were figuring that out, but the people were nice. And then that's how we
they
ended
were
up in New.
figuring that out. The snow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, like
hilarious.
chapstick. Like you're going to need
Yeah,
this thing called chapstick.
yeah. Like I remember a family visiting from Colombia, and they'd be here for the winter. And the first time they saw snow, I mean, they just go outside. They're like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah. Were they
That
afraid?
No, I mean, they were just like kids just because you hear about it all the time. Like anytime I've gone down to Colombia and it drops to like on a freezing night to like 71 degrees, my cousins will be all bundled up. I'll be in a
Yeah.
t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops and
Yeah.
they'll be all bundled up. So it's just incredible to see when you're taken out of your element,
Yep.
literally, just what a change it is, but the things you have to do to survive.
Yeah. The climate was definitely one of the challenges, and not understanding people, for people who grow up in the north, dressing in layers,
Hmm.
um, understanding the heater, the
Yeah.
what a furnace is, chapstick. Um, if your fingers get frozen, you don't put them under hot water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everything. My parents, so we all ended up in the same house. My parents, my aunt and uncle, and my grandmother used to, at the beginning, shovel the snow out of the yard so we could play. Because they didn't realize until they saw the Americanitos playing on top of the snow that it was safe,
Yeah. Yeah.
as an example.
I mean, hey, that's the diversity of the world. That's the beauty of the world is just how different it is. Not even culturally, but just the climate, just the different
Yeah,
landscapes. It's just
yeah.
you
And maybe
juxtapose those people and those lands. It's just funny. It's great.
the climate, I never thought of it that way too, but I think that whether they realized it or not, having vanquished that fear of the cold, or gotten past this thing that terrified them, right? It is yet another accomplishment that they could look at in some way, whether consciously or
Oh
not,
yeah.
as, hey, you know what? I'm pretty, and that's something I talk about in the book.
Yeah.
The origin myth that these women warriors came up with, which was, we were not victims. We didn't lose. We won. We beat communism. We beat Castro. Haha, look at us go.
Yeah.
Look at us. 2 years after they were there, they managed to save enough for a little duplex together. And we ended up living like we would have in Cuba next door to each other or
Yeah.
one above the other. And so that was this, and I was thinking about leadership and um, you have to be a salesperson at some point because you have to have your insight, and which they did. They said, we were wrong. This is not the revolution we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Then they acted on it, and then they had to convince everybody because it's not like everybody is convinced all at once in a family of refugees. You got to go one by one. And those women, my mother and her sister, my aunt, didn't see it the same way for years. But there was a moment, an incident that opened their eyes. And I was always fascinated by that. Like, what is it? Why is it that some people know to flee the Holocaust, see it as the Holocaust, and other people didn't and stayed and stayed and stayed? What makes people do that? And what kind of person are you?
Did that ever come up with your mom at all in any kind of conversations about your experience? What the difference might have been between people that did flee and people that stayed? I mean, even though
Well,
it's different circumstances, obviously refugeedom. I've had conversations on here with people whose parents were immigrants and who would talk about the people that stayed behind in the country. And it's almost like the same as like the entrepreneurial spirit, that fight, that
yeah,
innovation. I want something better. I can control, I'll control what I can. I'm not just going to succumb, for lack of a better phrase. Um, but did that ever come up about what the difference might have been between people that decided to go and people that just kind of stayed? Or do
yeah.
you have your ideas of what that might have been? The
I my
difference?
yeah. That I think in some cases you're forced because the situation in front of you is so clearly untenable.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why a mother puts a child on a raft. You don't
Yeah.
know what you're capable of until you're in that moment and in those shoes. Because, right, I was just at an event recently and a Vietnamese refugee came, former Vietnamese refugee came to me crying afterward because we were I talk a lot about this type of thing. And she thanked me and said, I all my life I've had to hear people say, "How could your mother do that? Put you on a boat? How could your mother do that?" And I had addressed that in the talk. So that's one. You don't know what you're going to be capable of doing until
Yeah.
it's there, until you become a parent, for example. You do things as a parent you thought you'd never do.
Yeah.
Um, but there are some people who are just born fearless or just don't have that fear in them. My mother was one of them. My mother wasn't afraid of anything. Of course she was, but she would just convince herself not to be. She would
Yeah.
ponte guapa, ponte guapa.
Yeah.
Um, but I have a cousin who was born after I left Cuba, and I went back to Cuba twice since we left. I was able to not easy, and I tried to get her to come with me because the first time she wasn't married and things were horrible as usual in post-revolutionary Cuba. And her excuse was, well, I can't leave, my grandmother. And then I asked her again several other times. Then she was married. Then she had children. It's too late for me. So there are just people who aren't going to do it.
Yeah.
There are people who stay because they love someone who won't leave, right? They would leave, but they love someone who won't leave,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I think that my mother and my aunt were just these formidable human beings who they had this belief in themselves. They knew who they were, and they were shaped by what happened to them and to their countries. And they were not afraid of anything in the same way again. Um, but it looked like, I mean, as I said, not everybody decides at the same time. My mother was the first to decide because of this incident that happened. Can I tell you the incident, what it was?
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to share.
Um, oh, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I my my mother was teaching a class. This was after the revolution came to power, and my aunt had a little school that she had started in the barrio, so it was all the neighborhood kids, and guards showed up, soldiers in their uniforms, and asked if they could teach a lesson. And my mother, what was she going to say? So she let them come in. The main guy said, "Okay, who here loves ice cream?" And the kids went crazy. The food shortages had begun. This was before the embargo, whatever, because it was 33-year-old kids running the country. Imagine. So everything had disappeared from the shelf. So the kids were crazy, just even dreaming about ice cream. And he said, "Bow your heads and pray to God for ice cream." So the kids bowed their heads. "Okay, raise your heads." Oh, how sad, no ice cream. "Bow your heads and pray to Fidel for ice cream." They bowed their heads, and the other soldiers came in with ice cream cups and put them on their desks. "Raise your heads." Oh, it was, euphoria.
Yeah.
And at that moment, my mother realized that the revolution that she had risked her life for was not the revolution she got. And it was the impotence of watching children be exploited and not being able to lift a finger as a teacher. And these were teachers who were born to teach and protect their students and help their students. It hit something deep in her, and 180 degrees. It had been building.
Okay. I was going to say it was probably building. That probably wasn't the only event that occurred, but that was the main event
Yeah.
that pivoted her thinking. I mean, how poetic of an event. Like that just seems like something you would hear in like a fable. The message from soldiers to children. Ice cream, like God, whoever's the dictator is at the time. It just seems very, I don't mean that in a complimentary way, but just very poetic. Just the imagery of that playing out in front of you, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
Obviously, we know the result, but Jesus Christ,
there were
that's
so many
powerful.
stories like that, John, so many stories, but that was one
Yeah,
that I knew was going to be in the book.
yeah.
And then Tia had a similar thing happen. And so I was always fascinated by that. What was it that tipped you over? How
Yeah.
did that happen? Um,
Anna, just to get, we'll dive into the book a little bit more, but I just want to kind of circle back. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing, your history with writing? Um, you had mentioned as you were telling me about your path, college, working in software for years. First of all, how did you end up going to school for computer science or theory or practice of any kind?
I didn't go to school for that.
Okay.
There's a liberal arts college, women's liberal arts college, and
Oh, that's right. That's
I
right. Okay.
studied economics. Had a double major in economics and Spanish literature. And um, I wanted to make money when I graduated. I needed to pay back, to pay off my loans.
Mhm.
It had been a major financial burden for my parents, and that was with financial aid and scholarship and work study.
Yeah.
And me working I remember thinking, how do these Americanas go on vacation and not work, or go on a unpaid internship?
Yeah.
Who's it? Because So I wanted to make money. How do I make money? I was going to be a banker. I was going to, because there were all these training programs in these banks and companies that would come to Smith and interview, and then hopefully you got into one of them. So I got into one at a software company.
Gotcha.
That's how I got into that. But I always loved writing. I just knew I was afraid of ever making a living, being able to make a living and pay off my debts.
Of course. Can you speak to your love of writing, when that started, and then when you
Yeah,
started working in that
yeah.
direction?
I was in fourth grade and I wrote this. We had a writing assignment and I made something up and the teacher just loved it and made me read it to the class. And I was embarrassed, but at the same time, I thought, well, maybe, and it was fun to write, right? So one thing I've discovered as a writer is that I hate it and I love it. If I hate it because it's almost something that I can't not do. Is that the way you would say it? I can't not
Yeah.
write.
Yeah.
I actually feel wrong, like something feels physically off to me if I haven't been writing. And so it's almost something that's out of my control. An affliction. I have a writer
Ah,
and a writer friend, and we call it our affliction.
good word.
But I love it because we were talking about that state of flow that you get into, especially when it's something that you care deeply about, a story, even I've written short stories, even something fictitious. But for me, most of my writing is nonfiction and fact based, and I want to get it right. I feel a duty to get it right and to make it beautiful if I can, or a, a lovely read. Um, And in the end, it turns out I'm creative. I'm a creative. I'm a person who needs to create things we're talking about
Amen.
gardening and stuff. That's all about creating something, making something with my hands, making
Yeah.
something with my words.
For you, so then your career in sales and software, where does that, did you finish your career out that way, supplementing it creatively, not financially, but supplementing it creatively with writing on the side? What?
No, I never, when I was working in corporate America, I didn't, other than taking a class now and then in silk screening, for example, or um, no, I was focused on on that. Then when I had my children, I had planned to stay in software. I had planned to work all along, like my mother and my aunt had worked forever, right? But they had
Yeah.
the grandmother at home. And I realized when I had our daughter that I didn't, we weren't sure if we could afford it or not, but we ended up taking the leap. That so that I could be at home, so that I could have the bond that I had seen in my home, and also take care of my viejos. My viejos were getting older by then, and they were getting sick, and I wasn't able to tend to them because of my obligations at work. So I just saw a pull toward family. Like, how do I make my
Oh,
decisions
yeah.
around the thing that I cherish? Um, and so that was how I pulled away from corporate America. And then it was during the rafter crisis, right, in the mid 90s, and seeing the reporting missing so much of the story. And I started writing then. Oh, and by the way, along the way in school and high school and college, I knew that I was a decent writer because my teachers and professors would tell me that. But I never trusted that it was good enough for me to ever indulge in journalism per se, or creative writing, or going into publishing or anything like that. I just didn't think that, one, I was good enough, or two, that would ever be financially allow me to do what I needed to do to help my family and to pay off my own debts. But then,
Where, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, so the 1994 rafter crisis, I wrote something that almost got picked up by the Globe, and the editor was so complimentary that I started to think, well, maybe I am good enough to be in a newspaper. And then that's how it started. I started doing freelance and ended up on NPR and ended up placing things in some big newspapers. And of course, in my own town, I did journalistic work for the local paper, um, and found that I loved it. I loved writing. I loved, yeah, where, like we were talking about before, where you're working, but it doesn't even exist.
It's scary how fast it goes by. Anna, for you, obviously we've talked about your childhood, your path to today. Um, One could kind of surmise connections, how you would connect your work today, who you are today, to your childhood. But what words, specifically asking you the question, does it make sense from your childhood that this is who you are today? How does your inner child come through? Again, you've shared so much of the connection, but asking you that question directly, what words do you put to that? What thoughts do you put to that?
How that defining moment in my life has made me who I am. Is that what you're?
Just how childhood Anna comes through
Oh,
in who you are today, how she comes through in the work you're doing today, however you were, not necessarily the experience of what happened to you, but just who you were as a kid. How does it come through in who you are today?
well, I feel very connected to that 6-year-old me. Very, very connected. Um, and like she's still there. And um, and she's still afraid, right? Because that was a really frightening experience. And I go into this in the book. There were things that happened that I blocked out completely until my daughter was the age I was when all of this happened to me, and then it all came crashing down,
Flooding back. Yeah.
which I had never. I don't know what your thoughts were on recovered memories. I thought that was bullshit. I thought, and it turns out it's not bullshit. It's real. You can really have our bodies, our minds know how to protect us
Yeah.
better than we do. And unconsciously, that is a survival mechanism. But so I feel like when I talk about what happened at my age and in these talks that I give and at book groups and just having people respond to that, that I'm taking care of that little girl and helping her heal. Um, but I also find in me a kind of silliness that comes from being that 5-year-old. As I said, I feel that connection. So I still just find myself feeling childlike, um, enjoying. You know how kids will like just look at a leaf for a long time, or um, play, and um, I'm kind of blanking on examples, but I
I
just
mean, just
like,
based on what you're saying, when my kids are 10, 7, and 4. So when they were younger, it's amazing watching them in the different phases. But in that phase when they can walk around, but they're not aware of like the social BS in life, groups and tribes or anything like that. They can walk around and whatever they have in front of them, they're obsessed with. They're completely in that moment. So it is interesting to sit back and just see them take something in, ask about something. I think it's been one of the most therapeutic things in my life is raising my kids. There's also the other side of that that can drive you crazy.
yeah,
But seeing the way that they look at the world and then myself rediscovering the world, the beauty of the world around me just based on what they're doing, looking at, taking in, asking questions about. So I think that's where you're going, but that's what came up for me as you were beginning to explain that kind of phenomenon.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've lost that. And I think I really, it's because that event happened when I was that age, and I'm just tuned into what that age was like. And I, it's not a conscious decision to be childlike, but it's in me.
Yeah.
Um, so I will do the silliest things like that. Like I'll just stare at some fascinating thing in nature, or uh, I think it's an outlook to a playfulness, which I think is really
Well, I mean, it's incredible you're up in New Hampshire. You know what I mean? Like the outdoors out there is just incredible. It's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. And I find anything with water
Oh yeah.
absolutely fascinating. Just looking, that's an example, like looking at water, looking at light on the water. I don't think I've ever been bored, John. I don't remember ever, how people say that they're going to retire, or they worry about being bored in their retirement. I don't think I've had a single day where I have felt bored with anything, because I am fascinated by everything, and water is one
Mm.
of those things, the light on water.
Yeah.
We have a lake house. We're lucky enough to have a lake house, and I'll look at shadows uh, uh, moving across the mountain in front of the house. Um, what that means, I don't know, but I think of it as something that not a lot of adults do.
Yeah. I mean, that just shows you something that I do that kind of is similar to that is just being at the beach. I love being at the beach. I love hearing the oceans crash. There's something about, I'm in the middle of the state right now. We're a coastal state, which we're blessed to have to be in. You're driving down the highway, through the trees, through the cities, and then it just kind of opens up to this vast ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a sense of wonder. It's a sense of smallness. Like whatever your
Yeah.
stresses are, stressors are, when you get to that ocean, you realize just how small you are and how, for that moment, non-consequential any of that stuff that you were thinking before you turned the corner and saw all that water. It just shows you how big everything is beyond our reach. Like just you saying the shadow moving across the mountain. I visualize that and it kind of puts you at peace because there are things that are much bigger than what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're in nature, and nature, that may be the role of nature besides actually feeding us. Um, it, it, it it's context. And yeah, a cloud's shadow moving over water, moving over a
Yeah.
mountain, is it's magic. It's something to be in awe of. And I've always thought that there's something about water. Like I wondered, I was thinking about it again, probably, you know, in one of my water focused moments, if maybe water is God.
I mean, it's the foundation of everything in life.
Yeah, maybe,
Everything in life needs it.
and
Everything.
when I was telling you about shadows, the clouds shadows, you bring up the ocean. There's something about water that humans need besides obviously perse life, but there's
Yeah.
something about it. And I find it, during the pandemic, we had just finished the lake house, and we were able to be there and watching water, even though it was frozen, um, because it was winter, but watching the ice break up as the spring came, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I know. I saw something online. I think it was a reel or something of a guy just sitting. he had a folding chair of some kind or a camping chair in the middle of a brook that was just kind of running by
Ooh,
him. There are things that I see. I think it's like the algorithm knows I love water.
yeah.
So it'll show like restaurants that have like their tables in a stream where you can sit in a stream. And I think it was somewhere in New England, I think. So it's
Oh,
probably up by your there's got to be something like that around where you are.
that's so cool. That's
But there
what
is that
are you?
therapeutic sense of just,
Yeah,
especially a river, just moving along and just, you know,
yeah, alive. It's alive. What state are you in?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
right, because one of the reasons that we couldn't do the recording in the winter because we got hit with that snowstorm and you had your kids at home.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Um, Anna, what do you consider your superpower?
Well, I think that that concentration, that ability to lose myself in my writing or in whatever it is that's in front of me once I'm tuned into it, into the wonder of it, um, is a superpower.
So
Um,
then how would you describe if it's a superpower? And I see that kind of as the absorption of energy, but then why is it your superpower? What do you do with it? What does it do for you? What do you take away from it?
it lets me create. It lets me create something I didn't even know. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what I was going to create with the writing. Um, but then it will be there because I was able to focus so completely and at the same time, in four dimensions, maybe maybe more than four dimensions, and get capture everything that I wanted to capture and create something that's almost tangible.
Yeah. Anna, what does leadership mean to you? You gave great examples of your mother, your aunt, your tia, what they needed to be, what they needed to demonstrate and be for their family. What does leadership mean to you? How would you define it? You gave great examples. What does great leadership look like?
I think that it starts with knowing yourself, knowing knowing yourself well, um, what and what you believe in well, um, because you have to be true to yourself in what you're doing. Um, and I think also people who can see, who have vision, who see what other people don't see, and then can guide because a leader that's one part of the equation you need if you're leading other people. So there's a salesmanship component to that. So knowing who you are, um, seeing where you're going, and leading and bringing other people, convincing other people to come with you to that
Yeah.
place.
Anna, all right. At this point, this is where we typically dive into the book. You've already shared a lot of the book. I guess I just want to ask a few questions about it. Starting with, at what point did you decide to pull the trigger and write the book?
Yeah,
Even how present was the book while you were writing? You had mentioned, I believe somebody had mentioned it to you, you should make this into a book.
yeah,
So what is the creative history of the book where it was kind of
okay.
percolating when you finally decided to do it? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, all along, as I said, I was writing about Cuba for a newspaper, for a magazine,
Yeah.
um, and that body of work was building. But then I think it was in 2011, I had a piece in the Globe, and two agents got in touch with me because of the piece. And because I had lied in my bio in the piece, I said that I was working on a memoir because it was about Cuba. The piece was about Cuba. And they said that they wanted to see the memoir, see what I had. So I didn't have anything. I just had all kinds of loose stuff.
Yeah.
But it was so exciting that one essay could draw two agents' attention. Um, so I began, that didn't really go anywhere because I didn't have enough, and I didn't, um, I actually created a 50-page beginning of the book, but I did it so quickly. And I wanted it to be a memoir. Neither one of them wanted a memoir, but I really was convinced that it needed to be a memoir. So they said, stay in touch, blah, blah, blah. And then I continued dabbling with it. But then in 2018, our son, who is in cybersecurity but is a writer at heart, said, Mom, you're not writing. You keep saying you're writing, but you're not writing this book. There's going to be a
Yeah.
conference in Boston, a writers' conference. I'll go if you go. And I went, and the book won a little award, or not the book, but the award was the first page or first 2 pages of your story, of your book. And then you competed with others, and it won this award, and I got a membership at this thing. But that gave me a lot of confidence, so I started working on it, and that's so 2018, but I didn't have a way in. So I
Hmm.
hired a woman who I met through a workshop. She gave a workshop at that conference who helped authors with structure. And she guided me through the steps of thinking about how the structure of the book would look like. Very detailed, very high level, and then very detailed. Where in the end I ended up with a map, with a plan of every scene, where the high points and low points were going to be, then every chapter, every scene within a chapter, why that scene was there. I mean, very detailed. Of course, that's not how it got written, but it gave me a path into this labyrinth.
Yeah.
Um, I wrote, I worked on structure for 4 months, 5 months. Then I wrote a 40-page proposal for agents to use to pitch the book, as nonfiction you sell with a proposal, usually to the publisher. And then I began writing it. And at the same time, I started sending out just a few feelers for agents. And I sent out 5 to 5 agents, and 3 in the end offered to represent me. And I thought, I'm onto something. But then it just, memoir from an unknown person is very hard to
Yeah.
sell. And they were saying things like, well, anyway, it's a long story, the publication thing, but I actually had a contract that was being worked on with a publisher in the UK that fell through. And so it's been up and down, up and down. It took a long time to get the book into the marketplace, but I like the publisher that I ended up going with, and um, I mean, nobody's ever happy with
Huh.
their publishers, but
Yeah.
there are things there that could improve. But it got me, it gave me the control. It gave me an author community within the publisher. That's one of the things that She Writes does, is it lets you talk. They connect you with your cohort, the other authors who have books coming out at the same time. And they've been great to work with. And then with the book, when you're writing a book, I mean, this has been my experience. Everything that's happening, you think, well, this will be the worst part or the hardest part. Okay, well, no, okay, so I did that. Now won't, after this, there won't be anything too bad. But everything is hard. Everything is a challenge. I think if you care, if you
Yeah.
don't care, you don't care. But if you care, you want to do your best at everything that you do, whether it's this, coming up with a speech. I love the speech that I give now with my book, and people really feel good, when after the talk.
It's another baby.
It's another baby.
So you've given a lot of great stories. You've given background, what happened to your family, how you ended up, New York, then New Hampshire. And you just spoke about the person that helped you kind of map out the different scenes. Although it didn't play out that way in the end, it wasn't structured that way in the end. To that end, how did you structure the book? What is it? How is it that you formed that story, that path to take the reader on? What does that look like overall? I mean, you've given so many great examples, but if you could, how
Yeah,
did you
yeah,
structure the book? How did you decide to put it in such a lay out that path in that way?
yeah. Well, some people don't even think about structure, right? And some of the best storytellers aren't thinking about structure. Um, they just know it instinctively. But I found it fascinating to study structure. So, you have your basic three-act play and what happens in your three-act play. I
Yeah.
ended up using a structure called the W. So you have and it's, imagine, I'm going to try to do this. I don't know if this will, well, I guess it's a mirror image no matter what, but let's say you
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
here at the top of the W. There's something that happens here that without that event, nothing can happen. The book doesn't happen. So for me, it's the day the guard comes to our house with our exit papers. Then there's falling action. So things are happening to us, and we think we know. We get down here, that first one, we get down here and we think we know what we're doing. We're in Nashua, and we start building our lives in New Hampshire. And then up here we have I get to high school, and I realize, that there's a clash between my identities in high school, and that's happening at this point. This, in some ways, was worse than this because I lost my footing, of who I was. I didn't want to be who I was. Um, and my family was keeping me back because my family, my father in particular, wanted me to um, be Cuban, and so then there's things that are happening, negative action or falling action. And then the worst thing happens at the bottom, three-quarters of the way through the story, which is when my grandmother passed away. And then the aftermath of that was rebuilding a new kind of family, immigrant family, what we were going to look like as Cuban Americans, and how I was going to be as a Cuban American mother. Um, and of course, throughout is Cuba. All
Hmm.
there, I decided that this would be a braided story. It's two timelines. So for that W that I just described, that's sort of my story. But at the same time, so they're alternating chapters, my story and the Viejo story that tells what was happening in Cuba.
Oof.
Um, so complicated, but that back and forth, readers have loved it because they get to go back in time and see how viejos, what these viejos thought was going to happen and what actually happened, and how they transformed, which informs the other timeline of the present, of the family moving its way through refugeedom.
And I'm curious for you in writing this book, aside from coming up with a book, the technical process of putting it together, finding an editor, from the book being out there, from being in this creative space from your own life, right? How did you evolve? How did you change? This is your life. You're committing it to paper. You know it in and out. But through that process of putting this book together, getting that message out there, what evolved? What changed in you? getting it out there?
I have changed a lot with this book. It's what you said, I'll go somewhere now and I'll make a comment to somebody like, oh yeah, my husband's Jewish, and they'll say, I know, because that's in the book. They know
Yeah.
everything about me, all of the things that I would never have shared when I was younger, like my problems with depression, which I'm, it has to do with what happened to us.
Yeah.
Um, um, so I think that sometimes I wonder whether, I mean, I've never regretted divulging so much because you have, as you get older, you care less about that part of yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just a little puny human being, you know, these things happen to me. I'm going to share them with you. And if you can't see that this is just a simple human being telling a
Hmm.
story and not getting all judgy, well, then I really don't care. you know, um,
Yeah.
but if you're open to the story, here I am. I have a doubt though about whether it's good for me to be in this space as much as I am, because in a way I'm reliving the hardship every time that I'm with readers and we're talking about it. Now I come out at the end energized, but I've had to face it over and over and over and over again and all of these things. And it's not my pain. It's my grandmother's pain, the what they went through, what we all went through, but especially with the viejos
Yeah.
group.
Absolutely. I can see that.
And, I'm the oldest girl in the family. I'm the matriarch, I guess now. But writing the book, the boys in the family who were older and then one is younger, they have really struggled with the book. They loved the book and they've always loved my writing, but they have struggled with having to face it. And they've cried when they've been reading it, and they don't like to cry. And my brother was reading it, and he would text me, "You're kicking my ass today. You're making me pick at an old scab today." How could those people have gone through this? Um, there were some things that happened that were done to our family that were really painful and would make him so angry. So it's a very emotional experience. And there was for many for probably the majority of human experience, you weren't supposed to be thinking about that stuff. We were, you didn't dwell on it. You just moved forward. You didn't think about the past. Here I am diving into some of, fortunately there's plenty of humor in the book, uplift in the book. But
Yeah.
for the people who had flesh in the game, if that's the saying, skin in the game, it's tough to look at it every day. Uh, well,
Yeah. I mean, there's so many interesting things you've just shared. Hold on. I got to write it down before I forget. Um, but what stands out is the difference between the generational thing. Because I think with immigrants, with so many immigrants, especially I can imagine in a refugee scenario, there is the danger of escaping, the danger of moving, changing your life, upending. It's a matter of survival. And then for the next generation, they don't have that physical danger, but they still have those lingering effects, especially in your case, because you were there. Um, so it's a different impact for them. It's like physical. It really is danger. Obviously, you're involved as well, but I mean, as an adult, and now you're processing it as an adult. So it's just, yeah. I
well,
mean, the other thing I was going to ask is if you if you could share any kind of therapy that you've had yourself, any kind of experience where um, you've dealt with this Is there anything you could, nothing too personal,
Yeah,
but
no, I,
just I think I think people could benefit from hearing about how it could help you, therapy.
yeah. Well, I haven't had a lot of luck with therapy. I haven't done it very much. Here's why, John. I don't know if you've ever had this experience because you're from Colombia or your family is from Colombia.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what I found is that, especially where I am, there weren't a lot of Latina or Latino therapists. So
Yeah.
they don't understand the culture. And you need to understand the culture to um, understand what's going on here in my
Yeah.
story. Um, and so most of it, the big thing though, was the psychiatrist who I thought was going to help me. When my daughter turned the age I was, I brought her in for an evaluation to see if she was ready to go to kindergarten. And that psychiatrist was like, yeah, she totally is. But she had taken a history and said, I want to understand better what's going on with you. And I thought she was just trying to get money and another client. And
Yeah.
she said, what is it that's so worrying you? And I said, well, the world at that age and things. And I broke down in hysterical sobs, um, which I'm not much of a crier, but and she said, I think this has to do with the trauma you experienced when you were your daughter's age. And I said, what trauma? And she said, well, when you lose your house and you see your family getting kicked out and you lose your culture and you go to a new land and almost overnight, that's trauma. And I said, no, no, because we were superheroes. We won.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was extremely helpful. So finding somebody who has that vision and that insight, if you can, try to dig around and make sure you're dealing with somebody who has that for you. Um, but I have found that the most important thing, well, and medicine. I mean, I take antidepressants, and that is a very important thing. I've tried to go off them a couple of times. Um, and it doesn't work. I just need to have them. Um, but also working with my hands, I find that anything when I'm sad or when I'm anxious about something, working with my hands is a real calming thing for me.
Yeah.
Uh, and my relationships, I am blessed with an amazing husband, an amazing um, network of old, amazing, good, solid friendships. And we talk. Find your people and talk with your people and don't hold your things inside and say I'm scared or I'm sad or say what you're thinking, say what you're feeling and also know that you'll get through it. This is today, this is this moment, and tomorrow's a new day and I can make myself brave. Ponte guapa, ponte guapo. You can do this.
Last couple of minutes that you've been talking, I keep hearing your mom's voice saying that.
Yeah.
And listen, it doesn't mean be brave, suck it up, and don't share.
No.
To me, it means be brave, suck it up, put yourself out there, share. To
Yeah.
me, I think the Latino cultures, obviously, it was very much generationally suck it up, keep quiet, do the work. But now we're like in a different time where you
Yeah.
can do the work, but it means say what you need and then work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is I think it's easier for me to say what I need because in our household, I don't know how it was in your household, but we nobody held back. I mean, it wasn't like peaches and cream and everybody lovey-dovey all the time. I mean, you just knew where you stood with everybody, and you would have
Yeah.
your arguments, and you would say what you thought, and then you moved on, and you helped each other, and you supported each other, but you didn't necessarily need to agree with each other, and we didn't. There was lots of, a
Yeah.
house full of teachers.
This lesson's mine.
Yeah,
Um, All right, I think I covered everything that I kind of gleaned from what you were sharing. Thank you for sharing, by the way.
You're welcome.
Anna, so somebody that may look at this book and say, there's nothing that I can draw from this book. I don't relate to anybody from Cuba. I'm not into history. I'm not into memoirs, should you call it that. What lessons, what words do you put to lessons that you would want people to take away from your book? Even if they think, nah, it's not for me,
Yeah.
what benefit do you think somebody could take from reading your book?
I think believing in the goodness of people, yourself included. I think the book shows that the capacity of a human being to admit a mistake. Well, first of all, to believe in something, admit they were wrong, make a plan, convince their family to follow them on the plan, dive into the abyss, um, survive, flailing a lot of the time, but survive, land in a new place, create a new life, find the right people, find good people. There are plenty of good Americans today, yesterday, always. And there are plenty of good people. Find them and skip over the ceborucos as my
Los come mierdas.
los come mierdas y los ceborucos. Um, it's it's a book. Property of the Revolution really is a it's a celebration of the best of America and Americans and humans. It's a human story, and um, I'm delighted with the reaction from readers and what they get, how they laughed, how they cried, how they learned, how they wondered, all of that.
Yeah.
It's a place I wanted to take readers. You know, when people always say, "Oh, so what's your book about? What do you want people to take?" Well, you just asked me that, right? I don't want people to take anything. I want people to come to this place. Come and be in that home of those brave people, funny people who lost everything and somehow recreated everything
Mm,
and lived with the pain but found joy. It's a map for life, or a way to live.
yeah. I love that. Just that obviously the real life chronicle of it, but obviously the metaphor too of just picking up and moving somewhere in discomfort, feeling lost, but then building something new out of joy. So I love that.
And family, very, very important.
Yeah,
It would have been a
absolutely.
different story if they'd been alone, one family, if they had lost that. But
Yeah.
because they had the tias and the tios and the primos and everybody together, and we were able to stay together,
Mm,
um, that was the thing that I think really, somebody called it, one of the blurbs I got was, it's a paean to an immigrant family. It's a love story of an immigrant family. And so I'm very, very, very satisfied with it. And it's allowed me to feel like I've done my bit to honor these
yeah.
people and this type of person.
Anna, you've mentioned how you're in the throes a year for the last year of still working on getting this book out there, talking about the book. Not putting any pressure on you, but do you see another book in your future? If so, in general, do you have an idea of what kind of direction you would want to go in?
I love the CubaCurious. It is kicking my butt quite a bit, because it's every week and it's news content. So you've got to really, and there's a hard deadline. So I want to keep doing that. If you had asked me about a book a month ago, I would have said, no, I'm done. But so many readers have wanted more stories about the family that I'm contemplating there's so much that got, as they say, left on the cutting room floor that I am contemplating something like that. But I was also I also have about 30,000 words into a novel about a Cuban cousin in Havana and a Cuban cousin in New England at the time of that uprising in July 21, 2021, which we're coming up on the 5th year anniversary, by the way, of the uprising.
Yeah.
And so it'll tell the story, a fact-based story about that movement. It was an artist-driven movement that kind of set the stage for that uprising. And so, as you can see, I've got a few things planned, but I'm
Yeah.
also just kind of tired, John.
No, hey, that's why I always say whether it's your first book and you're still in the throes of the PR of all of it, or it's after your career and that's when you're putting the book out there, or whatever it may be. It really is no pressure. I'm just always curious what kind of direction after the thinking that goes into the current book, the passion, the energy that may go in it, what somebody's focusing on for the next one.
Yeah.
No pressure. No
Okay.
pressure from me at all.
Okay.
Anna, before wrapping up, I'm curious, what book has inspired you or made an impact on you? Obviously, we're here talking about your book, but what book really stands out for you as just
Well,
kind of really changing your thinking or hitting you in the feels and the heart, whatever it may be?
well, I was inspired by Carlos Ayre's National Book Award winning book called Waiting for Snow in Havana. And it came out in 2003. And it's his memoir as a Peter Pan Cuban, Pedro Pan, the young Cubans who were sent
Hmm.
plane into the United States to be with foster families and whatever. And because their parents were so afraid of them being taken into indoctrination schools after the revolution. And so they did that quickly. But he's a professor of religion and history, I believe, at Yale. And it's a beautiful memoir. It was creative, funny, so Cuban. I felt like, wow, how did this guy create a place where, Cubanness lives? I admire him very much. I love all of his writing. I just read not that long ago. It's a scholarly book more than, but it's called They Flew, and it's about the tradition in the Catholic religion, but also in many other religions, of believing in levitation and
Hmm.
people seeing people levitating and flying, and bilocation and spirituality. And it's very historical, so that was very interesting. But that book really inspired me.
Now, oh,
Another one was Wild Swans. I don't remember the author's name. That's the story of of Chinese women surviving Mao and the Cultural Revolution. She did it's an old book, and she did an amazing job of marrying um, what was happening in society in China and her family at the same time. And that book really inspired me, and including the structure.
so with these two books that you've shown or expressed as standouts for you, obviously they parallel in theme, similarities to your own story. What does that do for you? I'm trying to kind of fashion the question in such a way, meaning sometimes is it too much or is it comforting to hear the stories of other people in similar situations? Obviously not identical, but it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear asking you about the books that stand out to you that have made the most impact on you and then being them being so similar to your story, which obviously has been traumatic, right? So what is your thinking about those top books being so close to your story?
It. I wasn't overwhelmed. I didn't
Okay.
think it was too much. I thought I was energized by the experience of going to those places that those two authors created, and in awe of how that was done. So how can I do that? Can I do
Yeah.
that? Why could I possibly make something even better? What aspect of it would I want to dial up or dial down? I guess that's part of the affliction of being a writer.
Yeah. Anna, and wrapping up, what are you up to these days that you might want to share? Obviously, you've talked about the talks you're giving, the appearances you're making, all of these things that go along with publicizing a book. Is there anything else that I should have asked that I didn't that you want to share? Anything at all? The floor is yours.
Um, I would say that what I'm up to right now is praying for Cuba and for freedom for Cubans. They've wanted it for 70 years. They never got it. They never got what they thought they were going to get, and they need it now more than ever. It's a people that have suffered unbelievably, and there's a lot of confusion still about the reality in Cuba. And so I urge people to look closely at it and consider different points of view. And it is not as simple as the United States has caused all of this. And just a peaceful transition to democracy is my wish for them. And the freedom of all those unjustly incarcerated people living in
Yeah.
subhuman conditions, all their rights violated. And the Cuban regime saying they have no political prisoners. They don't admit to any political.
Yeah.
So I guess let's focus on let's try to throw that into the universe and see if we can get that to happen for those for the 6 million people who are there.
Agreed. I appreciate everything you shared. And again, Anna shared her book, Property of the Revolution, From a Cuban Barrio to a New Hampshire Mill Town. Anna, thank you so much for being here for this conversation.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the honor.
Absolutely. It was great having you. If there's anything I might have missed, please let me know. So much to cover. I've kept Anna here for almost 2 hours, but there's just so much more that could be covered. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll reach out to Anna, see what kind of insights, guidance, wisdom, anything additional I can get. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye. All right, Anna.